You have to apply to them criteria of a racist society and racist individuals. For American audience, I will illustrate it best by my own experience when I was in United States in early 60s for academic studies. And I was then a very great traveler, and I visited Mississippi and Alabama and many other similar states in 61 and 62. And I found that a very great majority of whites really believed that if blacks of Mississippi will be given equal rights, then next morning they will rape all the speaker's sister, the speaker's daughter, the speaker's wife, and so on. They will smash everything, they will commit arson, what is more. So, all right, say and explain to the people that Israeli Jews, or majority of them, not all, their beliefs are exactly the same as the beliefs of American whites in Mississippi 30 years ago. That is all.
Okay.
The most important things are the attempts of Israeli authorities in the territory, the civil and the military administration, not merely to smash the Intifada, but to introduce, if they will succeed in smashing it, a system which should be called a computerized slavery, which is completely different than any other imperialistic or colonialistic system of this century, but which has strong connections with slavery systems. This is why I called it by this name. For example, let us compare it with South Africa and its apartheid. Under South Africa apartheid rules, the blacks are not limited in their movement during daytime. Any black from Soweto can now, or could during the old time, to take a bus or whatever, go to Johannesburg or in other places to go any other city, and walk the street, enter shops, do what he wants without any form of control, on condition that he will return at night to his apartheid residence. The system in Gaza Strip is very much worse, because for leaving Gaza Strip you need a computerized permit. Not only this permit can and is are completely arbitrarily taken away, meaning that a person simply by a order of an officer, of an order of a clerk, and all those officers and all those clerks are completely and absolutely racist, of course, worse than in South Africa. You can quote the poem from their officers, which is here in the report number 1, which I gave you. But so first of all it can, and secondly, if such a Palestinian is stopped inside Israel, he has to show his computerized card, and by a simple phone wireless phone, immediately the authorities know everything about him, his income tax, his previous conviction, if there are any, the reports of collaborators and other spies about him, anything that the Israeli authorities care to put on computer. I put to you that there is no place in the whole world which has adopted such a system. And I put to you that this can be an awful warning for the whole third world, and maybe not only for the third world. Who knows if the minorities in the United States, if Gaza will succeed, will not be treated by a modification of this way. And maybe not only minorities, maybe also striking workers, who knows. Second, let me speak about the green identification cards in West Bank. Let me begin first of all by identification card. Every Palestinian has to carry an identification card, and Gaza now also the magnetic computerized card in addition. And if he is not carrying his identification card, then at the many roadblocks in which he can be stopped, first of all he is beaten up. His bones can be broken. He's arrested without trial for a long period with his family not knowing where he is. Therefore, first of all, one of the many arbitrary and daily inflicted punishments, illegal by the way, but done all the time, is to take from a Palestinian from identification card. This is under the system in territories like you take from a person all his freedom of movement. This corresponds again not to any imperialistic system of 20th century, but the past laws inflicted on the slaves, and after this on the freed slaves in the deep south of United States, in the other slave systems. It doesn't correspond to South Africa, to French Algeria, to anything that you can find in the colonies of the 20th century. Now, this horrifying system has now undergone even worse modification. Many of the identification cards issued to the Palestinians in the West Bank have green color, which means that everyone having a green identification card, first of all, when he's stopped by a roadblock, he's immediately beaten up, detained, humiliated, and so on. Secondly, he cannot enter Israel, which means he cannot enter the officially annexed East Jerusalem. Now, the only way from North West Bank to South West Bank to from Ramallah to Bethlehem lies through Jerusalem, so immediately he cannot go there. So again, limitation of the most basic right of movement, and the situation is that those people are really limited to their homes, to their home villages or their hometowns, or even to their quarters if it is a bigger city, because simply by seeing a person with green identification card, the Israeli patrols and secret police beat him up, detain him, do anything that was done to a slave under a past law system in a slavery system. If though this system with other implications will not be stopped, I believe that we are, and if of course Intifada will not continue to have the help that it deserves, and in such matters like this, not in diplomacy, but in defending their right, their daily right to freedom of movement, to freedom from beating up, to freedom from humiliation, to appeal on all those things to public opinion, there is an awful possibility that a system of computerized slavery will be introduced in the territories, which can be then a model for such a slavery used in many other third world countries. Just as Intifada and its wonderful achievements is a model for freeing of other societies, not only third world countries, but also of the United States. For example, the Palestinians Intifada have freed themselves from drugs, from prostitution, from many problems that Americans cannot free themselves. So the other possibility is the awful model on the other side.
You have spoken at other times about the process of Nazification, of this continuing repression.
Yes,
where does this repression lead in terms of a solution to the conflict from the Israeli point of view?
Well, Israel, the majority of Israeli Jews, 80% of them don't desire any solution. All the talks about Shamir plan and other plan is cover up. What they desire, continuation of the situation, but making it worse, more of the same. Those magnetic cards and green identification cards have been issued by Rabin, member of the Israeli Labor Party. The income tax squeeze up, which I am sure you heard about, how important it is for so many Palestinians, is made by Peres. All talks of solution is nonsense unless the public opinion outside Israel will change, and unless very important and big public and political pressure and other pressure will be put on Israel, such as those 80% understand. And this can be shown again by example. Recent example. Israel has kidnapped Shahak, but nobody apart of 10-15% extremists proposes in Israel that we will invite Lebanon. Why? Because the Lebanese guerrillas have shown their strengths. The Palestinians, I am afraid to say, and the allies abroad didn't show their strength in such terms as the 80% of Israelis can understand. No one except 10-15% of the extremists in Israel proposes to invade Lebanon. And the answer is simply because the Lebanese, whatever their other qualities, have convinced Israelis of their strengths. The Palestinians did not. This is due also to the lack of public support for the Intifada. Unless the situation will be changed, I must say very seriously that the strength of human beings is not unlimited. I mean, human beings are made of flesh and blood, not of cardboard figures and not of steel and iron. And if Israeli government will succeed to smash the Intifada, this will not be only the return to 87, this will be summer 87, this will be a return to this will be a new system of computerized slavery worse than ever. First comparison about the process of Nazification should be made with the Nazi Germany in 33-39. Let me remind the people that actually very few persons and very few Jews were killed during that period in Germany. But what was done to Jews and also to other opponents of the regime? There was a constant regime of humiliations. Let us say, as in the well-known and true pictures, Jews were caught in the street and were ordered to wash the street or to clean the walls or whatsoever. What is done now to Palestinians? Exactly the same thing. Any Palestinian can be caught, humiliated, beaten up, exactly the same thing, and ordered to clean this, to clean that, to do whatever. Second, the Jews and also the other enemies of the society. Let us not forget that all those who oppose the society or who were from other groups like homosexuals, like gypsies, had the same treatment like Jews, were not under the jurisdictions of the ordinary courts and ordinary police and ordinary system of laws, but special laws like those infamous Nuremberg laws were made for them alone. We have exactly the same thing. The laws in territories are not territorial. The laws of United States apply to everybody who is in United States, not only to a citizen or a resident. If, let us say, somebody enters United States and commits a theft, he will be arrested and judged by the same police which arrests and judges American citizens. But if not only a settler, but also an ordinary Israeli passerby commits an offense in the territories, first of all, he will be judged inside Israel, and before civil courts, while a Palestinian will be judged in the territories and by military court. Secondly, he cannot be arrested by any policeman of the state of Israel with the same uniform who happens to be an Arab. Imagine, let us say, what would be said in United States if it would be said that a Jewish policeman has no right to arrest a Christian. In the same way, you have a division of the territory. Israel has confiscated a lot of territories a lot of land in the territories. Let us not discuss how. I regard it robbery, but let us assume that it has done it justly. But all this territory is devoted only for persons who are Jews. Not only it is not devoted to native Palestinians, and the percentage of such territory is in West Bank about 59%, but the discrimination applies worldwide also to Americans. If an American who can prove that he is Jewish will come to West Bank, immediately he will receive a piece of such territory with enormous amount of money. But take an American Christian, take Reverend Falwell of any one of the greatest supporters of Israel. If he will not convert to Judaism, and here you have the importance of the whole business about who is a Jew and the Reform conversion and so on and so on, he will not be able to have the rights, let us say, that let us imagine the worst murderer in United States who happens to be Jewish. Let us say that after serving 25 years in prison, he is liberated. He immediately has the rights in the West Bank, and of course in Israel too, that the best Christian or the best Buddhist or the best, I don't know what, doesn't have. This is exactly what the Nazis did at the beginning. All people who could prove that they are Germans received also outside Germany, received in the Nazi regime from the beginning certain rights from which were denied to Jews and to other so-called opponents of the regime. Now the most important in the two principles is the daily humiliation. The daily humiliation not only is an enormous suffering for the victim, but prepares the whole society for what comes after. Meaning the daily humiliation inflicted now during the Intifada is a process of Nazification of Israel Jewish society. It makes, for example, the soldiers worse this year than they were last year and again when they were, and it prepares the majority of them to be ready for expulsion or extermination. Another sign of extermination, of the possibility of expulsion and extermination, is that those proposals are by now completely legitimate and a matter of boasting. Only 2 weeks ago, when Rabin attended a religious Jewish meeting, and it was and a rabbi proposed him to expel all the Palestinians from the land of Israel, Rabin answered him, "I actually expelled more Palestinians than you did." This means legitimation of everything and anything that you can imagine. And practically nobody attacked him apart of the 20% minority which is anyhow against him. So this this boasting of expulsion as a sign of, you can say, virtue is a better sign of Nazification, I would say, than even the daily humiliation, because it shows what the 2 years of Intifada have done in Nazifying the 80%, I would say, of Israeli Jewish society.
Could you offer your opinion about what kind of rationalizations operate among Israelis for this kind of emerging fascism, and why has it been possible?
It is not emerging fascism. Forget about the word of fascism, it is too mild. In comparison to what I told you, the regimes, or the fascistic regimes, the Spanish Franco regime, or the Italian regime, or any other, not in times of civil war, should not be compared to the regime in the territories. The regime in the territories is much too bad. But you have to divide the Israeli public opinion into, let's say, up to 20% who oppose the present situation, and to the 80% who support it. About the 80%, roughly I can tell you a very simple thing. What they say about Arabs is true about themselves. If they are saying about Arabs, and they do say it all the time, and half of American Jews and all their major organizations say it even in more nasty manner, that Arabs understand only language of force. Very well, 80% of Israeli Jews understand only the language of force. If they say that all, and so on and so on, you have to apply to them criteria of a racist society and racist individuals. For American audience, I will illustrate it best by my own experience when I was in United States in early 60s for academic studies. And I was then a very great traveler, and I visited Mississippi and Alabama and many other similar states in 61 and 62. And I found that a very great majority of whites really believed that if blacks of Mississippi will be given equal rights, then next morning they will rape all the speaker's sister, the speaker's daughter, the speaker's wife, and so on. They will smash everything, they will commit arson, what is more. So, all right, say and explain to the people that Israeli Jews, or majority of them, not all, their beliefs are exactly the same as the beliefs of American whites in Mississippi 30 years ago, that is all. And the belief of every racist. Now, in addition, the political effect of every sort of racism, including the Israeli Jewish, and including, of course, even more the American Jewish, is a sort of schizophrenia which prevents all rational political discourse. What I mean is this, that a racist considers himself as at the same time the most powerful person in the world and the weakest person in the world. The weakest because if, let us say, the blacks would be allowed to freely choose their place on a bus in Alabama, then all the society will dissolve. This is what they believed, in spite of the nonsense. And the strongest, because they also believed that if the agitators from the north and the leftists and the liberals will not interfere, then we are strong enough to keep the blacks and in their place and forever and ever. Israeli Jews believe exactly the same thing. If the smallest thing in the territories will be changed for benefit of Palestinians, then the next thing the Arabs or the Palestinians will throw us in the sea. And you cannot argue with it, just as you couldn't argue with a white racist who believed that his daughter will be raped tomorrow. If a black will sit near him in a bus, then the next thing, they really believed it. I spoke with them. And you can go to the documents of that time. And on the other hand, if if the leftist Jews or human rights concerned Jews here will not interfere, if the West government will remember that all Arabs are terrorists and so on, then we not only can keep all the Palestinians in their place, but we can also uphold, so they believe, what they call the cause of Western civilization in all Middle East. You have seen it in Lebanon. You have seen it in so many other places. So once you understand that you have here to deal with racist society, with whom until the racism is broken from outside, like the federal forces sent to Little Rock or to integrate the University of Mississippi, and so on, then you have nothing to do. The society will only understand the language of force, meaning a language of all kinds of pressures. Force, I mean political force, I mean economic force, I mean any kind of force. It's not necessary always to shoot. Actually, the American army didn't shoot in Little Rock. But force, not persuasion, that all exhortations and all moral appeals towards the 80% of the Israeli Jews are useless, and the 20% have been already persuaded. Intifada goes now for more than 1.5 years. And exactly like in society in Mississippi was in the same way. The 10 or 20, or I don't know enough, were persuaded relatively soon until Martin Luther King began, and the others were broken by force.
Could you talk about the significance of the Intifada, the accomplishments, and how it has it changed the situation here, and how has it changed it?
We have to begin with the military and the secret police factor. Before the Intifada, the whole number of soldiers which were needed, what is said to keep order in the territories, was at usual times around 8,000. And even during the time of demonstrations and strikes, which never before Intifada occurred in all the areas together, it was increased maybe to 15,000, to 20,000. Now the ordinary number of soldiers is estimated by best authorities that during usual times it is from 60 to 80,000, during the times of stress from 120 to 150,000. This is of course an awful burden even on the racists. Let me quote to you a conversation which I simply overheard in a bus 3 months ago. Two people were talking about themselves, with themselves about reserve service, and one of them suddenly exclaimed, I don't mind going to territories and beat Palestinians, but I will lose my summer vacation with my kids. So this is also a good illustration of the force that I was asking you about, which can influence also racist. The second and more important in this area achievement is about secret police and collaborators. Actually, I gave you also some collection about this. The number of Israeli soldiers and border police could be small then, because Palestinians were ruled by their collaborators to a very great extent, and the collaborators served as a very efficient network to give good information to secret police. The first achievement of the Intifada was therefore isolating the collaborators and their families if they don't depart from them, and by this breaking the network and the power of the secret police. If to go to positive achievement of the Intifada, if many leaflets, national leaflets and local leaflets are circulating in all the territories, while all the printing establishments have been closed. In Gaza Strip, all the photocopying machines have been confiscated, impounded, and leaflets are still circulating. This is because, obviously, the secret police has not any network of informers to tell them how the leaflets are circulating. And Intifada couldn't go, to give you only one of this example about this, and so long as those two great achievements will continue, there is hope. And we can see it now that in Gaza Strip, in the great resistance of Palestinians to the computerized slavery, which can be only possible because the popular committees go and confiscate the magnetic card during the night, meaning that during the night they are secure. Why they are secure? No one informs about them or about the great majority of them. Before this, they were informers. Before this, they were collaborators. Before this, the occupation was cheap because of the collaborators. Now, why Intifada could achieve those two primary great achievements? Because Intifada is not only a national rebellion, however justified nationalities. Intifada is a most wonderful social revolution in Palestinian society itself. Palestinian society before Intifada, first of all, was patriarchal society. Meaning not only women were excluded from all influence in all villages, and now they sit on popular committees and are elected and they are debating and so on, but also the rule of Palestinians was by the heads of their families. I don't mean our collaborators, I mean every family, every extended family obeyed the grandfather because he's the senior. Now the Palestinians obey popular committees, which are popular, which means they are elected, even if they are after this a coalition. A person is elected because he's a good activist, not because he's a senior in his family, not because he's rich, not because he's poor, necessarily, because he's a popular activist. This is a sea change. In how many third world countries did this happen? In how many parts of the United States did it happen? Now, in how many parts of the United States do you have popular committees which organize themselves for action about daily concerns of the people? Now, in addition of justly opposing, the Nazi-like oppression of my government and of my state, and the humiliations and so on and so on, those popular committees and the Intifada have carried enormous positive revolution in their own society. For example, Palestinians before Intifada, and especially in Gaza Strip, had a great problem of drugs, something which is very familiar, I am sure, for American audience. And the drugs were promoted by Israeli government, both to weaken the Palestinian society and also because the drug merchants were also the collaborators and the informers. The Palestinians have almost eradicated the drugs from most part of the territories, but by the way, not in Israel, because in Israel there is no Intifada. The Arab society, the Palestinian society in Israel is still full of drugs. And they have done it by social means, not by technical means, not by all those programs with this preventive drug or this, but by social pressure, by exhorting, by giving people other outlet of activity, by making the society more meaningful and more cohesive. Second thing, Intifada has also to a very great extent eradicated common crime. I mean, stealing, for example, and other things, which was also supported by Israeli government. Even according to the Hebrew press, the thieves in Palestinian cities were supported by Israeli government before Intifada. Let me give you an example of a talk which I had with a Palestinian half a year ago, who actually returned during Intifada from Kuwait. And he told me, in Kuwait, of course, I was richer. But on the other hand, I had to lock my apartment with 2 locks. Here, except when the Israeli army enters my village, I don't have under the Intifada to lock the door of my house. All thefts in the village, and the same is true about most of the towns, most quarter of the town, has disappeared because of the Intifada, because of the popular committee, because of the form of wonderful popular democracy and social cohesion which Palestinians have invented during that occupation, and for which I am sure which is the best and the most valuable creation of all human race of the last 20 years. Just as the computerized slavery can be the most horrifying, the most Nazi-like, both creation and model for the whole world, so this invention of the popular democracy, which transforms one society, which makes it under such horrible oppression better to live in, which is one of the greatest strengths of the Intifada. This is why they are continuing under such horrible oppression. So this is the great. This is after their the former achievement. This is their greatest achievement. And you have only every big American community should simply look to Intifada as the example to follow in any campaign against the normal daily social evil, against theft, against crime of the youngsters, and so on. And the Intifada should be, in addition, of course, to its national aims, should be looked at as an example of wonderful democratic popular transformation of a society.
But the economic impact of the Intifada on Israel and the effect of this economic impact on the future?
Well, here Palestinians exaggerate. There is an impact, but it is much less than they imagine it to be. First of all, we have to begin with the fact that Israeli society, and therefore the economy, derives half of its strength from outside Israel, mainly from federal support of United States, also from other forces. So long as this is not touched, the Intifada cannot be really effective. Secondly, we have to remember that in addition to this, Israel has agreements of free trade with United States, have agreements with common market, which allow it to export its produce under very easy terms to those countries. This again cannot be touched to Intifada, because most of the factories producing sophisticated products are anyhow close to Palestinians. What the Intifada therefore produced economically, I would say, three things. The most important is that it created what the nice capitalistic investors are calling a bad climate of investment. Ordinary investors stop to invest in Israel, including when they are Jewish, from the time of the Intifada. And this is the main reason why the Israeli economy goes down. The second effect, in terms again of importance, this is something European which could be well imitated in United States. In most European, West European, countries, and especially in the big cities, there is informal boycott of the Israel agricultural produce. Meaning people, without any appeals, simply avoid buying, let's say, better Israeli avocado and buy a little worse Spanish avocado or things like this. Therefore, after a few days, the avocado, of course, in half-rotten state or the bad state, has to be transported from Paris to provincial town, where it fetches worse price. And this is, in direct terms, the most important loss of Israel, estimated, I don't know exact figures except for the first half year of Intifada, but estimated in hundreds of millions of dollars every year, because most of the export of Israel to common market is agricultural. The last there are several industries, of which the most important is the construction industry, meaning building of houses, which are dominated by Palestinians, but not only by Palestinians from territories, also by Palestinians who live in Israel. Therefore, the effect on building of houses is very much greater in places like Beersheba, in which it is estimated that 80% of houses are suffering, than in Haifa, in which the percentage is very low. For the time being, there are also many other places, but for the time being, I would say that the most important effect of the Intifada is stopping private investment in Israel. I would also add that so long as public opinion in the West will not change, Israel can live with it, because what it does is to borrow money in commercial banks. The leading lending bank to Israel is Chase Manhattan, of course, but there are many others. There are also quite a lot of banks in Bahama using the Latin American capital, which escapes them. So and all those banks are trusting American verbal guarantees. Therefore, even if you want on this limited angle on economy to move Israel, you have to move the American public opinion or sections to it into achieving such volume of noise that will penetrate the marble halls of Chase Manhattan. And it was done with South Africa. All right.
You've talked about, to go back a little bit, you've talked about racism as a motive for the occupation. Do you think that this is a primary motive, or is it a derivative? Is it secondary to the desire for the land? Could you also...
This is all the same. Desire of the land and racism. I include in racism...
Could you connect it to the religious justification also?
Yes, but all those things are mixed together, but nevertheless it is true that the religious justification is in all the mixture of all the factors the most important one. And on the other side of people who are opposing racism, the most important single factor is education. The more people are educated, the more they oppose racism on the average. First of all, you should say that the majority great majority, overwhelming majority of Israeli native rabbis, meaning not those who came from United States and who are conservative or reform, but Israeli native and official rabbis are racist in a way which cannot be imagined even in Likud. Whatever you can say about Shamir or about Rabin, and even about Sharon, the rabbis on the average are worse. For example, to give you only, I will give you three things which only happened recently, in the last 3 weeks, let us say. First of all, only this week, 3 days ago, the oldest Israeli rabbi from a little town declared that all Arabs should be regarded as murderers. Yes. And so far I didn't see that any other rabbi protested. Some secular persons protested, but I didn't see any other rabbi protesting. He didn't, by the way, say all Palestinians are murderers. He said all Arabs are murderers, which again brings me to the subject of Nazification, because Nazis oppose not only German Jews, but all the Jews in the whole world. This means that according to his opinion, which will have a very great influence, any citizen of United States of Arab descent is, according to him, a murderer. This as simply as this. Second, the chief rabbinate, which is an official body in Israel, together with its rabbinical council, has formally declared that Israel should not give any of the territories in land of Israel, even if there will be any danger to Jews. Now on this there is opposition. There is opposition by two very famous rabbis, Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Shahak. I will quote you both of them. Rabbi Shahak said that in his opinion territories can be given up if there will be a danger to life of a single Jewish soldier. Now, not only he didn't say about anything about Palestinians, he didn't say anything about the non-Jewish soldiers in Israeli army. There are Druses and Bedouins and other Palestinians who are serving in Israeli army. Try to imagine somebody who will be speaking in the United States, especially let's say a bishop, about danger to Christian soldiers in the United States army, and you will immediately see the difference. Try, let us say, to imagine what would have happened in the United States that when Reagan proposed invasion of Nicaragua, an archbishop would say that he opposes it because he doesn't want to invade in Nicaragua for the care of the Catholic soldiers. This would be a very exact comparison. And Rabbi Yosef said that he is under certain conditions for giving the territories because Israel is weak. How Israeli weakness is illustrated according to Yosef? According to him, we have a religious obligation to expel all the Christians from the land of Israel and to destroy their churches. This was officially published in print and so on and so on. But since we are weak, we cannot carry out this religious obligation. Therefore, also the obligation to holding territory can be disregarded under special conditions. Now again, try to imagine a country in which a very senior religious person will say that if the country will be strong, we will expel all the Jews and destroy all their synagogues. Try to imagine what would happen, let's say, if in Poland an anti-Semitic bishop will stand up and will say, now Poland is weak, we need American money, we need other money, but if we will be strong, the test of our strength is to expelling the Jews and destroying the synagogues. This will give you immediately not only illustration of the 80% of Israeli society, but also of the religious factor in the racism. And again, I will emphasize that on the risk of playing the devil's advocate, you can imagine my opinion about Sharon, but Sharon will not advocate expelling Christians and certainly will not advocate destruction of their churches.
Policy in regard to the Palestinians, but with the Zionist lobby so strong, how can public opinion influence?
Well, first of all, it is not only Zionistic or Jewish lobby. The key to seeing the situation in the United States is to understand that Israel is supported unconditionally by coalition of four factors, of which it is true that the Jewish lobby is the first. But you don't have to forget the unions. AFL-CIO fanatically, completely and totally supports Israel, which is inside the Democratic Party is, in my opinion, a very important factor, and the absence of discussion of this is, I think, disastrous. Secondly, you cannot forget the fundamentalistic Christian churches. For example, in the South, I have myself met Christian black clergymen who, because followers, let's say, of Reverend Falwell, he has black followers, to whom their church opinion are more important than anything else and who support Israel fanatically. And in addition, you have the extreme right, symbolized by Senator Helms and his followers. Let me give you on the last group the following example, political example. When our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Arens, visited the United States the last time, the first person that he met after Secretary Baker was called Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson is not Jewish, but he's both a clergyman and extreme right. The second person was Senator Helms, with leading a delegation of 14 senators, all of them from states in which Jewish community is very weak. Well, in Carolina there are not very many, north or south there are not very many Jews. There was no one senator, let's say, from states like New York who joined Helms, because they are opposing Helms on others. They will support Bush against Helms. So therefore we will not see the support of United States to Israel, both inside United States and in global terms. We will not analyze it beyond the Jewish, in addition to Jewish support. And we cannot, let us say, begin to undermine the trade union support and the fundamental church support if we discuss. If we not discuss it, we will not see it as it is. Therefore, what I am telling to you is that I am telling to you two things about public opinion in the United States. The first is that Israeli support in United States depends on a very efficient coalition, of which the Jewish lobby is one part. And the first thing which needs to be done is to know this coalition, to describe it, to introduce the whole subject, to introduce, for example, the whole subject that all the Jewish organizations are blindly supporting Shamir, and what AIPAC does, to fight against it like you fight any other important lobby in United States, important bad lobby, and the Jewish lobby and the whole coalition is not fought inside United States as, let us say, the Chinese lobby was one fought, or like the Southern coalition which opposed the giving civil rights to blacks was fought. In fact, nothing is done in United States in political terms. One reason for it is that the cause of Palestinians is not being explained to the ordinary American public in terms in which it can understand. Practically nobody, and here I blame the PLO and PLO-connected organization first of all, is not addressing itself to ordinary decent Americans. I don't, of course, mean the supporters of Senator Helms, but the ordinary decent American in the middle, for whom, let us say, impounding frigidaires is something horrible and something which he can understand, for whom, let us, stopping free movement of people, like I described in Gaza Strip, is something that can understand. Well, international conference on Middle Eastern affairs, or even a Palestinian state, is something that you cannot move anybody, let's say, in the center of Kansas. And I found it by my own experience, by my friends, that the Israeli influence is during the Intifada, not undermined more than it is in my opinion 80–90% fault of those who don't do their plain duty. And it is not a question of so much money, it is simply a question of addressing ordinary Americans in the language that they can understand. And in the 80s these things were done, the invasion of Nicaragua was prevented, South Africa, what was the situation in South Africa 10 or 15 years ago, and Israeli territories worse than South Africa. And you can give me probably many more examples. Things can be done. It is the concentration on things which are not understood by most Americans, except activists on foreign affairs, and how many are them in an ordinary American town, which is the first and the most important thing to blame. The second, lack of research, lack of the following the proverb, know your enemy. I think that if those two things will be followed, and especially if people will limit themselves and their feelings. I am here criticizing also the Arab Americans. I know and I understand that killing of children is the thing that moves them most, and me most. But I understand that when I will address an audience in a typical American medium-sized city, and Israeli consul or somebody primed by him will stand against him, I am not on a good ground in concentrating on murder of small children, because the argument will be put that those children have participated in a terroristic demonstration, and it is the guilt of the parents who didn't keep them at home, and then will be bogged in the details and so on and so on. But if I will at the beginning limit myself only to the things horrible enough which the Israeli government admits, which can be supported by the Hebrew press, on which no Israeli consul or his delegate can discuss or debate my facts, and will be shocking enough for ordinary American, I am winning from the beginning. And what is more, this is how every campaign was won. Again, if I am again giving my great example how the situation in American South itself was changed. It was changed by concentrating on not on lynching, but ordinary daily incidents which public opinion, slowly of course, in the north or in the west or in the center, after it became aware of it, didn't want to tolerate. That is it. So you have to follow the best American examples, and that is it.
Could you answer another question about the opposition here within Israel? What is it like to be opposed to Israeli policy? Is it difficult to publicly take a stand, to protest? Could you make comments about this?
It is easier now than it was 20 years ago. First of all, the opposition has become greater, and also it has become wiser. I mean, when I am living here, I don't concentrate only on helping Palestinians. That I do when I write in English for messages abroad. When I am living here, for example, I concentrate quite a lot on opposing rabbis, also on Jewish grounds, which are very many. Now, let's say in a city like Western Jerusalem, which is both the most religious and the most anti-religious city in Israel, maybe in Jewish terms in the whole world, I enjoy quite a big popularity by being publicly known as the enemy of the rabbis. I don't think this would happen in Brooklyn, but Israel is different. I think we can illustrate it more and the advantages that it brings me also in other work if I will tell you one of my favorite anecdotes, one of the really good things that happened to me. It happened in 83 or 84. Meaning when we occupied a much bigger part of Lebanon than we did. And two students in the university were arrested because they didn't want to serve. I don't remember exactly what was the case. Anyhow, the stupid sergeant major here didn't allow them their books, which they should. So I was appealed as a professor, and I took the books and I went. So he began to argue with me when I found him with the usual stupidities and so on. But suddenly he stopped and asked me, "Are you this Professor Shahak who is known as the enemy of the rabbis?" When I admitted the fact, he actually kissed me on the box cheeks and said, "For the enemy of the rabbis, I will allow not only the books, but the cakes too. And so it was. It is in the center of the city. So after delivering the books, I actually could buy them cakes. So by combining our opposition, we stand on very many Jewish affairs, which are dividing the society much more, not 20%, 80%, but in other proportions, we can manage very well. If we are, let's say, if we know our society and so on, We have our troubles, but they are not like they were 20 years ago. And I surely want to tell to American audience that it is much, much easier for me to say those things in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or in any other place in Israel that it would have been in any American city with big Jewish population. This is one of the keys to both to the problems, to the solution. With all that I said about Israel and Israel Jewish society, we are enormously more liberal on the average, on the average, than the organized part of American Jews, than the fundamentalistic churches in the United States, or a majority of them, and then the corrupt and rotten leadership of the trade unions, not to speak about Pat Robertson, Senator Helms, and so on and so on. I would argue with very many people in Israel with much greater pleasure and much greater profit than I would argue with any of them that I mentioned.
Time for one more? Time for another question?
A short one.
Short one? Well, the question will be short, the answer might not be, but you can answer as much as you like. Could you talk about the geopolitical and strategic motives that the United States has for its support for Israel, and do these exclude the possibility of settling this question with the Palestinian state?
Well, we are now in a question of a rapid global change because of the glasnost, because of the whole change in the stature and policies of Soviet Union, because of what happened in China only 2 months ago, which in addition to the horrors made China very, very weak. And because of this, the first thing to remember about is that Israel is not needed as much by United States establishment, I don't mean of course people, as it was needed only 3 or 4 years ago. To give an immediate example, you all have heard about the Israeli involvement in the Iran-Contra business. Well, Contras are being now disbanded by Americans themselves. So Israel is much less needed at the present. So whatever I used to say 3 or 4 years ago that the global factor is very, very important, and I used to preach also that, which was true at the time, that many circles in the United States are afraid that the Soviet troops will emerge from their borders and will conquer Kuwait or conquer Saudi and something like this. Now, except Senator Helms, here again the importance of, I don't think that any in Bush entourage now believes this nonsense. I mean now in '89. Because this we are actually, we don't have to combat the idea of Israel being needed to United States on a global scale, in Honduras or in Philippines or in this and that. On the contrary, if Israel supports Noriega, so on what side we are in United States, obviously. And also in the Middle East, we are in a much better situation. This is the reason, by the way, why Israel is trying to blow up the Sheikh Obed kidnapping as the anti-terror card. This is the last card that it has left in American public opinion, but you have seen Senator Dole standing up and saying, and not retracting, what he said. So, from this I derive 2 consequences, that Israel has, supported by Hebrew press, by the way, what I am saying in answer to this question is not only my private opinion, this opinion of the best Israeli experts. Israel has now, because of the changed global situation, only veto power of United States and not its complete support as it did have only 3 or 4 years ago. And it is aware of this and tries not to enlarge its support. Let's say it doesn't try to go and to make some alliance with Senator Dole and his likes, but to keep the coalition that I described that it has in order to achieve veto. For example, Israel doesn't try now openly to obtain enlargement of its federal support, only to keep what it has. And many other things like this. So, and Israel will try to play the anti-terroristic card in many, many wildest ideas that you can or cannot imagine, not only in order to play the single ace, but in order to try to disrupt the relatively good relations between United States and the Soviet Union. I am not saying that it will succeed. From what I told you on many other questions, you should have understand that in addition to Nazification and cruelty, the Israeli establishment is also stupid. A very important fact by itself. But it will certainly try. But we have now, because of Intifada and Glasnost in combination, we have now the best chances for fruitful operation in public opinion in the United States that we had from '67 or maybe from the time of Eisenhower.
You didn't discuss Israel as a local cop on the beat in the Middle East to protect the oil. Do you think this...
No, because to protect an oil from whom? This is your answer. Well, the first idea was to protect the oil from the expanding communists. Now, obviously, this is for anybody except Senator Helms and his friends. This has disappeared. You see, it's also the idea that there will be an uprising, that Palestinian terrorists will burn Kuwait. It may be restored by Israeli actions, but for ordinary reader of New York Times, you see, I am not setting my sights very, very high. New York Times is not propagating the idea that Shiites or Palestinians or any other kinds of Arab Muslims will capture the oil fields of Kuwait or Saudi Arabia anymore. So if there is no danger, and about Iran, well, Iran is selling its oil to the Western world also during the war. So from whom Israel will have to protect the oil? There is no such a thing. Therefore, I am emphasizing again that Israel has to invent now an international terrorism from whom to protect. But meanwhile, there is nobody to protect.
That's an Arab nationalist regime emerging that would...
I am not asking now what I see. This is a completely different question. We are discussing what Americans, except the right wing and the pro-Israeli coalition, are seeing. The American establishment, the people who support Bush or the mainstream of Democratic Party, is not seeing Israel as necessary or to support American interest, imperialistic interest in Middle East in the present political situation. Worries about any future nationalistic regimes, this is not American way. You know, they are only worrying about things which they see approaching in the last few months.
Why don't they move faster then in this dialogue? And why don't they...
in which dialogue?
In the dialogue with the PLO. Why don't they...
The coalition, the veto coalition in Israel, which supports Israel and the United States. Of course. And there is another reason. American government, and especially American administration, and I mean here the real administration, not necessarily Senator Baker, but let's say the experts in Washington, are extremely cynical. In every area of American foreign affairs, including Israel. Now, Israel is visibly weakening. The Israeli army is deteriorating. The Israeli economy is going down, slowly, but it is going down. Why they should not wait for 2 years more and then deal with a much weakened Israel? Do they care about Palestinians being killed? Do they care about Palestinians about beaten up? I didn't accuse them of this crime. So my idea is that in addition to the veto power of the pro-Israeli coalition, American administration cynically waits for Israel to be more and more weak, for more and more American Jews being discouraged with the situation, and then it will try to impose its own solution. I think it is quite reasonable in what we know about the American real government, not I mean its declaration, but how it proceeds. I think it's a very reasonable assumption.